Myself and many of the other speakers today are Southerners, so we'll say welcome, y'all. Today's webinar, you know, the photos up right now show some happy folks, and we hope that you know, we can keep this webinar light and fun and entertaining, and hope that you'll help us in doing that today. So both to start out on that note, and also to get us started with using the polling technology, I have a poll question to get us started. And Michael, are you going to pull that up, or did you want me to?
No, you got it. I'm pulling it up.
And so the poll question for you is, how are you feeling today? Michael, can you see the results from where you are?
Yeah, hang on. There you go. Bunch of happy people.
And one more poll question for us. Michael, will you pull that up? How do you hope to feel after the webinar today?
Hang on 1 second. All right.
And do we have a final word, Michael, on that?
Yeah, it looks like a lot of people hoping to learn something today and get rejuvenated.
No crazy, though?
No crazy folks.
Okay. So to give you a little context for today's webinar, several of us on the line are in Arkansas, and we had a desire to learn more about what young leaders in our state need to be successful. And so we looked around for how to find that out, and came across two wonderful reports that have been done by National YNPN, Young Nonprofit Professionals Network, that if you haven't checked out yet, you should. Stepping Up or Stepping Out, and also Good in Theory, Problems in Practice. And that gave us part of the answers we were looking for, but we also wanted to know whether the findings of those reports were reflected locally here in Arkansas. So we took on a survey of our own, the Arkansas Voice Survey, in 2012, and actually are in the planning stages now to repeat that survey in 2014. And along the way, learned a lot about what it means to support the next generation of leaders in the nonprofit sector. And so what we want to do on today's webinar is take some time to discuss the findings of both the national surveys and the local surveys, and what it means for us as emerging leaders in the field. And also, hopefully, each one of you, wherever you are, will come away with ideas for finding more out about the sector locally in your communities. So I want to start out by introducing the folks that you see on the line. The photo up right now is me, and I'm Reagan. That's on the Great Wall of China. That is not Arkansas. And I've asked everyone to tell one interesting fact about themselves. And so I'll start, and I'll say that I'm from Arkansas, and I share a birthday with President Clinton, so two local folks with the same birthday. And next, I'll pass it over to Sharice, and if she'll introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Sharice West Scantleberry. I am President and CEO of the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation. I am the older youth on the call. And an interesting fact about myself, I think that Minnie Mouse is the quintessential animated diva.
And next I'll pass it to Trish.
Hi, it's Trish. I'm calling in from Brooklyn, New York, where I am based. I am the director of the Young Nonprofit Professionals Network National. And one interesting thing is that I will be starting skateboarding lessons this Saturday.
And next, Sarah.
Hi, this is Sarah Kinzer. I'm Communications Director at Arkansas Community Foundation in Little Rock, and that is my Hermione Granger Halloween costume from several years ago. When I first started at the Community Foundation, I was probably the youngest person on staff by about 15 years, and our average age at the Community Foundation was probably 55, 60. So the next generation leadership issues are really near and dear to my heart because I've grown up in an organization with a big generational gap, but a growing generational gap, and so I like to bring a little bit of silliness to the office, hence my Hermione Halloween costume.
And then Marquita, who are you and one interesting thing about you?
I'm Marquita Little. I'm the Director of Policy and Planning for the Arkansas Department of Human Services, and my interesting tidbit is I actually started cycling about 2 months ago, and my proudest moment to date was the first time I got a scar from cycling, which is only exciting to people who aren't really very athletic to begin with.
So we'd like to take a moment and ask you to test out the chat feature for us to get those fingers warmed up, and type in your name and also an interesting fact about yourself, and we'll share a few of those now and a few of them as they go through the webinar. So if you'll take a moment, let us know the chat feature works and let us know you're on the line. And so you will send a chat to organizers and panelists. Michael, will you read a few of those for us?
Okay, looks like we had a few. A fun one from Emily Ruddock. She's a potter and made all the plates and dishes in her home. Oh. So something for all of us to aspire to. I've got another from Lauren Grattan. She's YMPN San Diego. Her middle name is as long as her first and last combined. Lauren, you should share that middle name with us.
So now we want to talk a little more about what is actually in the report itself, both the national and the local report. And Marquita, I'm going to turn it over to you to start our conversation about that, and the rest of us may pipe up as needed, but we also want to get some feedback from folks in the room. So Marquita, are you ready to take over?
Absolutely. Okay. So first, I just want to make sure everyone can hear me. I was having some sound issues earlier.
I think we can hear you well, Marquita.
Okay, great. So as Reagan mentioned during her overview, really YMPN Little Rock, we were very inspired by several of the national reports to really create a local dialogue. So the 2007 Stepping Up and Stepping Out report and the 2011 Good in Theory, Problems in Practice report, or the YMPN National Voice report, which we so eloquently borrowed the name for our own Arkansas Voice survey and report. And so again, our goal was really to localize the effort. We wanted to be able to have the conversation with young professionals in our state about their perspective on their careers or potential careers in the nonprofit and public service sector, and where they saw really themselves going in terms of long term and potentially moving into leadership roles. And so I'm going to go through a few of the findings, and I think our full report should actually be on the YMPN Little Rock website, and I think we can probably also send that out so that you all can get more information on all of the findings. But I'm really going to zone in, I think, on a few of those things that are very relevant to today's conversation. So first, one of our first findings, which I think won't be a surprise to those of you who do work in the sector, when we polled our respondents, and we had over 100 young professionals participating in the survey, we found that the great majority were women. Those currently working in the sector, about 73% of the folks who responded actually were women. And then some of the findings more specific to today's conversation regarding kind of that generational leadership piece. So we polled the respondents, and we asked them, are you currently happy working in the sector? And about 93% said that they were very satisfied with the current work that they're doing in the nonprofit sector, and 82% were actually still very satisfied with their current jobs. So we went on to discuss and ask questions regarding salary, advancement, and such, as it relates to why they might consider leaving the field. And our highest response overall locally in the Arkansas market was that low salary was a very common reason. So I find that to be a really interesting finding when you compare that with over 93% being satisfied in the nonprofit sector and 82% really being very satisfied in their current jobs, but identifying that low salary was a major issue. Some other areas that were identified was going back to school, wanting to start a family. We also included some questions really regarding leadership and where folks saw their careers going in the future. And so when we asked about leadership and if our respondents would be interested in or potentially would consider an executive director position, 35% of those, 53% of those who responded indicated that they would consider a position as executive director at a nonprofit. So over half of our respondents, and then another 35% said that they would not, and about 12% were already serving in that capacity. And when we delved a little bit deeper into, the kind of rationale around those responses, many of those folks who said they would consider really felt like taking on that role of leadership or executive director would present as a new challenge, and they'd be more interested in taking on the new challenge rather than the better pay or salary that came with it. So they were much more motivated by the impact that they could potentially have. We also inquired about what some of the barriers were. So for those folks who said they would not consider it, or those folks who did not feel like there was really a clear pathway for them to move into an executive director capacity, and some of the barriers or challenges that were identified was really having a lack of experience and skills to feel like they were prepared to move in that type of role. One of the other findings, so in polling these young professionals and asking them what were their current needs as emerging leaders, what did they feel like was very important for them in terms of developing those leadership skills. And a lot of those young professionals responded by indicating that they really felt like they needed additional training and that training was often not available. I think, that finding is really directly related to a lot of the response we received on would you consider moving into an executive director role. Many young professionals did not feel like they currently had the skills, in addition to indicating that oftentimes the skills training that they felt like they needed was not really available, or the opportunity was not there to attend the appropriate training. When we, again, delved a little bit deeper into that question and conversation, we found that a lot of young professionals felt like training opportunities were often reserved for this more senior level staff and not really available to folks at an entry or mid-level. And of course, there's always the issue within the sector of budgets, and training often being one of those luxuries that's cut when we're having to make decisions about budget and spending. So those were some of our major findings. Again, it's very interesting when you really delve a little more deeply, and I encourage you all to go and read the more detailed report, and certainly if the opportunity presents to conduct similar surveying and research in your local communities. It's been a great tool for driving that conversation. So those of you who want to jump in, if you want to call out any other findings that you thought were important before we transition to Trish to talk more about the national findings, please feel free to do so.
Well, I think we have some polling questions that we'd like to ask the audience to give them a chance to get involved and see how their responses fit in with what we learned. So, Michael, are you able to pull up a polling question for us?
Yeah, everyone should be able to see the first question. Do you plan to stay in the nonprofit, public service, philanthropic sector?
And then once we have consensus on answers, Michael, if you'll let us know what the answer was.
Yeah, it looks like we have about 3/4 of everyone voted, so hang on, I'll share those results. Looks like we have a lot of people who want to stay in the sector.
So then if you flip back over to the slides, Michael. Then as this compares to what we found in the reports, nationally, 45% of folks plan to leave the sector, although some said that they may plan to return. And in the Arkansas survey, we found that 95% of folks plan to remain in the sector, but locally, we found that only 52% said that they would stay in the nonprofit sector in Arkansas. And Michael, how about our next poll question?
You got it. You should all be able to see this one. If you were to leave the sector, what would be the most likely reason?
And Michael, what are our results telling us?
Hang on one second. All right, we have about 3/4 shared. You guys should all be able to see that 42% burnout, 50% low salary and wages, and 8% start a family, go back to school.
And so if we look at how that compares with nationally, the percentages may be a little different, but the answers are very similar. So nationally, burnout was by far the highest answer, with low salary and wages coming in second. And in Arkansas, again, we found that low salary and wages were at the top. And then, Michael, how about our third poll question?
You got it. All right, everyone, you should be able to see this one. If you're not currently executive director, would you consider taking the position? Hang on one second. All right, and you should all be able to see the results. 58% said yes, 33% said no, and then 8% weren't sure.
So again, that we see that in all three, our phone call nationally and in Arkansas, the results were fairly similar, although with nuances. So nationally, about a third of folks thought that they would likely become executive directors, but felt like stress and work-life balance would be challenges. In Arkansas, the percentage was slightly higher, but felt that lack of experience and skills was the biggest barrier. So we spent quite a bit of time talking about the Arkansas survey on the front end. Trish, is there anything you'd like to add from the national survey you feel like folks should know?
Yeah, I mean, I think, that polling was great. I love seeing sort of a comparison across, in different spaces, but, I think the results really speak for themselves, but just, I guess, a couple, maybe two quick comments that I would add, one is that I think, with YNPN and definitely with EPIP also, we tend to focus on programming that fills gaps that we're seeing in terms of access to leadership development for emerging leaders. And, our biggest things are making sure that emerging leaders have, access to professional development and networking events that they wouldn't have access to otherwise. But, I think that that's really important. But at the national level, we've really come to realize that this form of research and advocacy, that helps us to really understand what's going on for emerging leaders in the sector is, is just as important as that direct programming, so I wanted to applaud, YNPN Little Rock for taking this on, because it's just so important to shine a light on what's helping and what's holding back, I think, talented folks that are working in the sector. So just wanted to stress that. And then I think the other thing I'll say is that, I think that the results that you had up, the side-by-side comparisons, they show really clearly how important it is, to take a macro view of what's happening across the country, but then to really, really test to see if the same story is holding true locally. We did this, a similar workshop at the EPIP conference, and I remember the first time I saw those stats next together, I was really struck by that first stat about how many people, for example, plan to leave the sector. And to me, that's a perfect example of what we're talking about, this local comparison. So clearly retention isn't really an issue for the sector in Little Rock the way that it is nationally. And so for you guys, that really opens up a space for you to focus on advocacy on areas that are actually issues for folks in Arkansas. So maybe that's family life balance or flex time for education, for example, which we heard in some of the later stats. But anyway, it's just, I think it's one of the reasons that we really encourage our chapters to test out what they're finding nationally, just to make sure that it kind of holds true locally. So I'm really, it's just really great that Little Rock's leading the way on that.
And I had gotten overly excited, and some of y'all may have seen the last slide I had up, which is a photo of the view. I don't think most of the people there, or some of them at least, are still on the view. I'm too busy at work most days to know the difference, but of course, that I selected this particular version of the picture of the view because President Clinton shares the home state with several of us and a birthday with one of us. Apparently, I'm not the only one on the line with a presidential birthday. Sylvia shared that she's from Philly and shares a birthday with President Obama. And Sylvia, I think we actually met at the first EPIP conference I ever went to. It's nice to know you're on the line again. So the reason why the picture from the view is up is we want to have a conversation, more interesting than the view, but amongst some leaders in our field about what findings like this mean and what we as emerging leaders on the line should be thinking about and doing now and in the coming years, both to prepare ourselves for leadership, but also to prepare the sector for our leadership. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Sarah, who is going to help be our head view speaker. She can be the President Clinton of the crew to start a conversation about what these findings mean to all of us on the line.
Thanks, Reagan. Yeah, so I'll moderate, and I want to call on Trish and Sharice to take a turn on this first question. So the title of this webinar is "Are Next Generation Leaders Ready to Step Up?" Sharice and Trish are both obviously at high points of leadership in their careers and are both leading large organizations. So I want to ask both of you, from where you sit, let's start at the basics. Why lead? Why step up and lead? Trish, will you start first, and then Sharice, will you take over next? Oh, Trish lost audio. Okay, Sharice, will you start, and then we'll get Trish in on the question.
No worries. So why
I'm back.
lead?
I missed the last 30 seconds or so.
Sorry, Trish. Sharice is going to take over, and I will shoot you a chat message to let you know what's going on.
Okay, so my response to the overall question of this webinar is, are we ready to lead? And I say, yes, you are. We're all in various stages of readiness, and sometimes you're not ready until you actually have to do it. And as young people, we fret so much, or I used to when I was young, fret so much and spent so much time concerned about readiness and what that meant. And in actuality, I was being prepared all along the way. Everything from setting up conferences to, I know some young people hate it when they have to take notes at meetings and they're always the note taker, or doing what we feel is trivial grunt work that we believe in our own minds we are far more superior and should be paid way more, and we all can do our jobs better than our bosses, and so we spend so much time jockeying about politics and who gets an opportunity and who does what, and it's such a terrible waste of your time. Because in actuality, all assignments, stretch goals, all things that you're asked to do are preparing you for that time that you have to step up to whatever that leadership is. And quite frankly, you're already leading in whatever it is you're doing and in whatever role it is. The increasing responsibility just comes when you prove yourself and when opportunity comes. So if there's anything I could say to my 20-year-old self now, today, as I approach 50, it would be just that. Stop the fretting and just enjoy what you're learning and what you're doing now. And you're leading, quite honestly, from where you are. There's a lot of influence and a lot of power. And I probably had more power as a program officer than I do as president. But didn't realize it when I was in such a position, because I spent so much time bellyaching and complaining about it and wishing and longing for something. And in actuality, I was living my leadership. So, yes, we are ready. Yes, you will be prepared when folk like me go out to sit on our porch and you call us for advice. But yes, also take advantage of living and enjoying the now, because the leadership that you are doing now is leadership that's preparing you for whatever God has for you next.
Thanks, Sharice. Trish, you want to take a turn at the question of why lead and are we ready?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sharice did a really great job of responding to this question about, about are we ready and the basics of why. So I guess the only thing that I would add is maybe a specific challenge to the young people that are on the call, to the women that are on the call, to the people of color that are on the call, because that's, I think, the other way that I would answer the question of why. With one of the most important pieces of YNPN's mission, and I'm sure EPIP as well, is not just sort of equipping folks with skills, but also activating them, reminding them that it's not just a matter of being able to, but really feeling as though, you have, for lack of a better way of putting it, permission to, and sometimes that permission comes from, being offered and accepting opportunities that come to you, board positions, being able to lead a chapter, being able to organize a study, whatever it is, even if it's not leading an organization. But I think many of us can tell stories about the fact that our activation came from seeing people who looked like us, that sort of broke the mold of what we have as our mental model for what a leader looks like in those positions. And so I would just also encourage folks that are maybe on the margins of who we tend to see in leadership positions to really take this as an added challenge. That question of why lead. I think there's something really important to be said for activating others who might not see themselves in those positions through stepping up into your own leadership.
And I would also say, Sarah, in addition to what Tricia said, is again, keep in mind that we are leaders right now in whatever it is that we're doing. Even if you're a mother in the PTA, even if you are, a program officer in some specific area that you enjoy, we are leading now. Just even being on this call is a step in the right direction to maybe, adding to our toolbox or having conversations about it. But leadership is not something you're trying to attain or strive to. You actually are there now.
Thanks, Sharice. And Trish. So what I want to do is try to involve the audience a little bit in our VIEW panel. So I'm going to ask you guys to chat in, any questions or comments that you have about the things that we're discussing, but also I want to try and do a little bit of an informal poll. So right now I want to ask the question, how many of you are already in a leadership role at your organization? Either you're the executive director or you're at the top of your branch of the org chart. If you would go ahead and chat that in. Michael is going to be, I think, manning the chat and can kind of give us a sense of where everyone stands. I'll go ahead and ask another question for our panelists, so we'll have some talk going on while you guys are chatting. And don't forget, you can ask questions along the way too. I saw we had a question come in from Jamie about some of the demographics of the survey, so we're going to look that up and we'll answer that in just a second too. So in the meantime, let me toss this one back out, I guess, to Trish and Sharice again, and maybe you both might have a different perspective on this. So we talked a little bit earlier about how there is a sense that young people don't necessarily always feel prepared to step into an executive leadership role, and also that when there are limited dollars for professional development, sometimes that training doesn't come to the folks who are lower down on the org chart. And then there is also this sense that since many nonprofit and philanthropic organizations are very flat, there's not a lot of place to practice your management skills in the middle of the org chart. You're either a program officer with no one to supervise, or you're the CEO with the entire staff to supervise, but there's not a lot of place in the middle to gain the skills you would need to be that manager. So when resources are scarce and when our organizations are flat, where can we go to get those skills that we need to prepare to lead in an executive way? So since Sharice took the first one last time around, Trish, do you want to start?
Sure, and hopefully you have to let me know if the background noise gets too much. It's apparently school's letting out in Brooklyn right now, so for the next generation. I would say, and Sharice I think started to speak to this a little bit too, but as we know, there are opportunities for leadership all throughout organizations, throughout every day that we step into our organizations, and I guess the other point that I would make to expand on Sharice's point is that those opportunities also exist outside of our organizations. So two places in particular that I would point to, we definitely promote or encourage people to really look at board service. If I could think of the number of times I've been approached by folks at conferences or after I speak on a panel, folks that are letting me know that they are so desperate for younger voices on their boards, and is there any way that we can connect with them? That to me seems like such a win-win in terms of giving folks space to be able to to have some of those stretch experiences that Sharice was referencing, and also to really fill an immediate need. And then something that I personally have been experiencing, I live in a neighborhood in Brooklyn that is experiencing just a lot of community change, a lot of displacement of older neighbors and things like that, just based on the changing demographics. And so I've just been really fascinated to see what a gap there is in my community in terms of needing everything from skilled facilitators to people to set up processes for being able to, organize meetings or track complaints and things like that, and so even just applying what I do sort of every day in a community setting has given me a chance to exercise and to grow in some of my leadership skills. And so, so I would say looking outside of the organization or whether it's board service or community involvement would be a couple things I'd recommend.
Thanks, Trish, and that's kind of borne out by what some of the folks are chatting into us about their executive experience. So they're saying, no, I'm not the ED at my office, but I'm on the board of YMPN, or I'm on the board of our local EPIP chapter. So sounds like that resonates with a lot of folks in the audience. So Sharice, do you want to take a stab at that one as well?
Sure, and so I'm going to be a tad provocative, Sarah and Trish and Marquita. So Marquita, you also chime in. So you know that you go to work to make a living. Because sometimes I know as young people we get confused about that. Some places really aren't responsible for your development and don't feel that they're responsible for your development. You're actually responsible for your development and for what you manage, how you manage, getting those skills. And I say that to be provocative because sometimes we feel when we go to work like we're actually owed something, when really it's an exchange of service, your service, and you're being paid for your service. And really that's the responsibility that you have when you go to work every day and the responsibility your employer has to pay you for your service. So I toss that out because I know that there are many colleagues who are in that situation where they're in places where they have their managers, bosses, and the like that either don't support their development, don't pay attention to attend their development in any way, and in additionally don't have the budget to support that development. So it really does become an individual's responsibility to set an agenda for his or herself to get what you need to aspire to the level of service that you want to do. And if that service, and you see yourself or your vision is to do that in a C-suite position, then it really is your responsibility to do so. Now, again, I toss that out as a provocateur because I actually don't value that myself. My own experience is that I had a whole bunch of folks who cared a great deal about my development. And as a result, I pay it back in how I manage and support my team, thus Reagan, even being on the seminar, working in an EPIP and the like. So I want to be clear, while that's not necessarily something I value, it is a reality. And it's even a reality once you get to the C level, because there are many things when I got to this level, and my first experience was in 2 times in Louisiana. And I remember coming to my office and saying, now, what the hell am I supposed to do now? Or what is this about? And, I would have to go back to books and call friends and go to management classes and look on podcasts. So even when you get to this position, you begin managing difficult people or, the press. When I was in Louisiana working on Katrina, and I had some press and communication skills, but not really. Even recently for us and our leadership around the immigration in Arkansas, just because I'm an African-American woman does not mean I can speak on immigration issues, and actually had to go back to school, Reagan and I together. Like I went to Reagan, honestly, I said, Reagan, I have no idea and I don't want to mess up. So we, poured through literature and books and talked to people and the like. So it never stops. Which is a point that I want to make. But again, I value that development because it was something I came up with in my own career. But we have to keep in mind that we come to work to make a living, and we don't come to work for anyone else to see our value but ourselves.
This is Marquita, if I could chime in briefly. I absolutely agree with the notion of really taking ownership of that development piece. You know, I've had the experience of, you know, working for companies and in capacities where I literally had absolutely no idea what the expectations were, what I was to accomplish, and no one was invested in me as an employee or professional. Luckily, I currently work in a capacity where I have a boss who thinks it's very important to talk about, you know, the career pathway that I see for myself within our organization and what types of training opportunities would support that. And it's really been wonderful. And actually, I think it's been a great experience for me having the experience both, having that really structured process for assessing my skills, and the areas where I have challenges and identifying some professional development opportunities, or just not having anything and having to really make an effort to do that myself, because now I'm sort of in a mid-level position whereby I'm able to incorporate those aspects of leadership into my own supervisory style. And so I currently oversee our graduate fellowship program, and we've been able to create a formal process of having our fellows do an early assessment of strengths and needs, really identifying over the course of a year what those skills are that they want to build. And, you know, I know they take a lot from that. It's a challenge to sit down and actually think about what your strengths are and what are the areas where you need to work. But it really makes me feel good as someone who's now in a leadership opportunity to really embrace that and be able to. It's an investment. It's an investment in your colleagues. You know, I think one of the biggest challenges, though, is when you're you know, busy on the, you know, road to success, and you're seeking out all of these opportunities as a young professional, and you want to do the current job you have really well. It's so easy to totally forget about the future and what skills you need to develop to get there. And so I have to remind myself and make a concerted effort to really think about, you know, you have to find a balance between doing what you do now really well, but making sure you don't get so caught up in sort of the day-to-day of your job that you don't think about what are those new opportunities that will give you new skills to get you to that next stage of your career. So I think finding that balance is important.
Thanks, Marquita. And I want to circle back around to a question that was asked earlier that I've got a response for now. So Jamie asked about the demographics of the Arkansas Voice survey. So on that survey, most of our respondents were between 26 to 30 years old, but we did have some participants as young as 20 and some a little bit older than 40. Actually, 12% of our participants were over 40. So we had a pretty broad age gap, but it sounds like the plurality were 26 to 30. And please do continue to chat in those questions to all of us. But I want to piggyback on something that Marquita said just now. You talked about, you know, looking for the skills that you will need for the future, not just for your current position. And so, Reagan, if you're around, would you mind speaking to catalytic coaching and to how the process that you guys have at the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation for assessing performance and moving forward is kind of challenging you to get involved in some of that thinking about the future?
No, absolutely. And actually, Sharice and I are sitting in the same room, and so both may have perspectives about it. So I'll say that she may speak up as well. But about a year ago, we shifted from a more traditional evaluation to using catalytic coaching, which is a system that involves setting goals for yourself and projecting out not only over the next year, but over the course of a number of years. And I think what it really has done for me is to open up this idea, as Marquita was speaking about, of being open and honest with your employer about what your long-term goals are instead of just your short-term goals. And in that way, you know, Sharice and other folks in the office become a part of my future success. And instead of sort of trying to develop myself only for now and then on the side, or, you know, having secret hopes and dreams that I only tell to my friends outside of work. I can tell my hopes and dreams to my colleagues, and they become a part of that. And then to be held accountable for it, that in evaluations as the year goes on, you know, if I hope and dream, you know, for example, you know, I think I might want to be a CEO someday. I don't know for sure, but it seems like something. So there's certain skills I know I don't have right now. And, you know, certainly, for example, the finance person in our office can use help from time to time. And if I want to develop those skills, then suddenly it opens up a conversation where I say, I want those skills. I sure am glad to help you. And we, you know, in that way become mutually beneficial to each other. And if I say this year I'm going to develop some financial skills, then I really have to do that. And for example, this year one of mine was around public speaking. I want to get in front of people more often. And so as the year goes on, in addition to being evaluated on whether or not I meet program goals and otherwise, I'm evaluated on whether or not I met these personal goals. And Therese, do you want to add anything? She said no.
Thanks, Reagan. So I want to go back to just the point of all of this surveying that has been done, both through YMPN National and then in our Little Rock chapter. And I want to, I guess, ask this question to everybody quickly. What do you think is the most important finding from your perspective about the future of young people in the nonprofit and public service sector? And then maybe to the audience, what are some ways that we can address these things? What are some ways that organizations like EPIP and YMPN, or like the organization that you work for, can address some of the needs of young people in the sector to make sure that we are ready to step up? So Trish, why don't you take that question last? So maybe Marquita, would you be willing to say what's your top number one takeaway from all of this surveying, the thing that sticks out the most to you?
Sure. I think that one of the things that stuck out the most to me in terms of the survey is probably the importance for young professionals of really feeling like they're making an impact more than anything else. You know, I found that with the survey findings and then just the follow-up conversations we had around the survey, that young professionals want to make sure that their contribution is valuable, and like I said, that they're really having an impact. I mean, of course, you know, leadership and formal leadership positions are important. Salary is important, but more than anything, you know, and I can agree with that as a young professional. You know, if I'm not having a major impact, then that's probably the point where I need to reassess, you know, my role in that organization. So that was the big takeaway for me, the high importance of impact.
Thanks. Let's see. What about Reagan and Sharice? Would you guys go next, and then we'll flip over to Trish last?
I think, you know, one of the findings that we didn't necessarily lift up here, but will come as no surprise to folks, is about the importance of connection, that we often sit in our offices or even talk to our friends and, you know, complain about things or, you know, salaries or otherwise, but there actually are things that we can do collectively. And both the survey results showed how much folks appreciate connection, and I think that the outcomes of the survey show me how much we can do to change the future face of the sector using those connections.
And then mine would be, actually, if you don't mind indulging me, it would be two. One is I was so pleased that young people want to be in the sector and stay in the sector, because again, that leadership and that desire and the role that nonprofits play in civil society is so vitally important, and we need to make sure that there's a pipeline of those willing and able to take on leadership positions and stay in the field. So that young people want to stay and want to be in the field is thrilling to me, and my whole career has been dedicated to nonprofit public service, so that was exciting. And then the other one quickly is I really want to bust the myth that that there is no work-life balance, because there really is. And And but it's all of what you make it. Just like in positions that we're all in now. I mean, we can all stay at work until 9 o'clock at night if we wanted to, and work ourselves to death, and make sure every device is on at every moment of every second of every day, and you know, so it's you really can create the life that you want to have and have that balance. And I just want to bust the myth that it's this kind of drudgery, no life, because you really can have a pretty fun life.
And then Trish, if you will give us your number one takeaway, and then also maybe say some final words about, you know, we're speaking to an audience of folks, most of whom I think work for philanthropic and grant-making organizations. What is the role of philanthropy in addressing some of these needs of developing the next generation of nonprofit leaders?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of you know, I think the question underneath all of this is, you know, what do we do with this information, you know, in addition to just what's the most interesting finding. And I feel like Marquita really hit it on the head for me. You know, YMCA National at this point has put out 2 of these surveys, and, you know, these findings and reports really become an entry point for us into bigger conversations that are happening at the national level. You know, these reports are what get us invited to speak on panels and what allow us to comment on articles. You know, it sort of flags people that we have something bigger to say. And for me, as the ED of this organization, and also in terms of what we're encouraging our chapters to really focus on, is not getting lost in this this sometimes buzzy conversation about leadership for leadership's sake, you know, and to really focus on, well, what is it that we are trying to accomplish, you know, and Marquita talked about this, you know, the importance and the focus on impact, and I just want to underscore that, you know. So, you know, in terms of the challenge of all of this, what I would say is that, you know, as we're moving towards increased professionalization as individuals and as a sector, you know, as we're looking, you know, to add more structure to our organizations, or, you know, gain credentials and legitimacy, you know, for the way that we do our work, you know, we really need to keep our vision on, you know, our eyes on that vision for a just and equitable society, right? And so, you know, just it's the challenge, I think, is reminding ourselves that the people that we actually have to prove ourselves to as we're thinking about how to improve ourselves in this work is the people in our communities, the communities that we're serving. So not funders, not social capitalists, not the private sector, but really those folks in communities that we're trying to work with and have the greatest impact on. So I guess, you know, more practically, the way that I think we can be doing that is, you know, as we're having these conversations about what's important to us, you know, as you know, professionals in the sector, whether it's work-life balance or increased salaries, you know, to really make sure that we're tying that to the struggles of people that are way more vulnerable than probably anybody on this call. So, you know, if we're talking about higher salaries for nonprofit workers, how are we tying that to bigger conversations about a living wage, for example? Or if we're talking about access to leadership opportunities, how are we tying that to bigger conversations about greater access to opportunity in general in our communities? You know, and so I think that's something that we can just be much more active about. And, you know, the challenge is just maintaining that balance, the focus on our personal development, professional development, and the impact that we want to have on our communities. And I think philanthropy can play a huge role in that, supporting you know, studies like this, really helping to you know, put funding towards important conversations that help keep that focus, that bring different community members together, things like that. And so, so really just really both playing the support role and taking a lead in modeling those conversations is something that I would really encourage folks that are working on the foundation side to consider.
Thanks, Trish, and thanks to all of our panelists. Reagan or Michael, it's 3 o'clock. Do you guys want to say any final remarks?
I just want to thank all the panelists again, all our attendees. It was a great webinar, great conversation, and please join us in the future. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, guys.
Take care, everybody.